Okay, so we find ourselves in the kitchen. I'm joined here by John. Hi, John.
Good to see you, James.
Our friends at BlueSource. We're here to talk about the data governance picture today and also talk about the collaboration between the two of us to take some new solutions to market.
Exciting times.
Yeah,
great
to
be
see.
here.
So let's kick off. You know, we're just going to generally have a chat about all this stuff. So there's lots to talk about. What are the main information governance and privacy challenges that you're kind of hearing at the moment from your customers?
Yeah, great question actually. So we're seeing a lot of changes to that market, whereas in the past it was very much a tick box exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're talking about data protection, that's been around for a long, long while. So they've had their processes and policy in place. What we're seeing now though is that actually they've now got to go and find that data to be able to hit what they need to do with regarding policy. So actually, the policy, which was just paper-based, has now got to be real-based, and people are finding problems trying to find that data.
And we think that's coming back, you know, with British Airways and Marriott being fined and all of that. We think it's coming back into conversation. Do you agree? I mean, I think people are suddenly saying, hang on a minute, we've got to remember this GDPR stuff we did last year, a bit like the Millennium Bug. We thought it was all over, but actually we've now got to keep moving on this.
Absolutely. And one of the changes we're seeing as well is technology decisions and some of the technology conversations we have. We're seeing compliance and CISOs and security coming and getting involved in those conversations. You know, people are talking about going to the cloud. They're making their environments more complex. So absolutely, being able to have a policy and process that able to get GDPR correct within the organisation, being able to find that data, we're seeing a massive review of that whole process as well. One thing I wanted to ask you though was around, I've heard XNR talk about generation privacy. It's an interesting, I've not heard it mentioned too much before. Can you give me a bit of background on what that means?
I guess we're sort of midway through a big revolution. You know, digitally, our lives have become more digital. Data is now, you know, the new raw material, as people say, or the new oil, or there's various different ways people talk about it. But data has, you know, exploded in its volume and its scale as us going and as consumers, you know, living our lives and doing things in new ways. And like in most revolutions, the kind of regulation, the negative sides tend to have to catch up with the technology, if you like. So what we're really seeing is that as data happened and as people's private information was thrown all over the place, normally for good and normally to enable people to do new things, there's a negative side in terms of breaches, the data getting into the wrong place, people exploiting data incorrectly. So what we're really seeing now is that the new feeling, the new sentiment in the market is around thinking about privacy in a way that people didn't have to do before, specifically around data. And we think the next sort of 5 to 10 years is going to mark a new era of the consumer owning their data, which is one of the key things now. You know, GDPR, really the core principle behind the whole lot is that the consumer now owns their data. It's not the company that holds it. And that has, I think, triggered a new generation of kind of privacy concern.
Absolutely. And is that a trust aspect as well? You know, we're seeing a lot of the terminology trust being mentioned as well. Is that something that you're seeing, you know, is that important to you guys? How do you help with that side?
Yeah, because that's the impact at the end of the day. I mean, privacy is one thing, but actually the biggest danger for organizations is a loss of trust. So if I entrust you with my private information and I want to do business with you as a brand, I want to buy from your brand, I know I have to give you some of my information depending on what I'm buying. I implicitly have to trust you with that, just like you trust any human being when you give them your information. When you see breaches and brands who haven't clearly got themselves in a position where they can be trusted with your data, it damages reputation. And the problem with reputational damage is that then affects people's intent to buy. So there's a bunch of studies that have been done recently around, you know, how consumers feel about trust with the brands that they buy from and how consumer intent changes if you mistrust the brand. So it's really, really important. And actually, you know, you look at the fines, so BA fined a healthy amount of money. You'd think that would be the extent of the financial damage, but actually the reputational damage, if people start choosing to fly elsewhere or choose a different brand, that's actually potentially much more damaging than the fine itself.
Absolutely.
Going back to the GDPR thing just for a moment, given the fines that were announced, and we understand sort of on the grapevine that there may be more coming, Do you think that in the boardrooms across the country, we've got renewed interest in investing and moving that compliance agenda forward?
Yeah, it's, we're seeing now the regulator to have teeth. Everyone was looking to see what cases came out, and we're starting to see those cases come through now. So, it's like you mentioned about the Millennium Bug, we're now starting to see the benefits to organisations that have taken it seriously, understand their policy and processes, and what they now do with making sure their data is secure and collected in a place that they can actually discover against it. So we're seeing people now also look at outcomes based. So we've had the policy, now we need to do something with it. Can you help us now do something with the policy we have? Because it's been a written down exercise, and now we're seeing those DSARs come through.
Yep.
We're seeing a lot more. We've been asked, can we provide services around that type of requirements from the customer as well? So we're seeing the regulator making the first steps to punish some people who haven't looked after that data correctly.
Yep.
And now other people are looking at it and making decisions on where they spend their budget
Yep.
to hit those requirements.
Could this be us? They're saying to themselves.
Absolutely,
That's the question.
absolutely. So James, how do you think businesses are going to transition from that data protection as a tick box policy on paper exercise towards something that's actual, usable and can be put into proper practice?
And it's a really big problem because when people went for compliance, they thought about their policies, they wrote them almost from a hypothetical point of view maybe, rather than thinking about how it might work in practice. So a policy might be, let's say it's around curriculum vitae, CVs or resumes or something like that. You may have written a policy that says, 6 months after an interview process, whether the candidate was hired or not, we're going to delete all CVs, resumes from our systems. Yep. And that sounds like an easy policy, it's an obvious thing, it might make a lot of sense. Not a lot was thought about how you actually make that happen day to day when the employees in the HR department, or indeed the employees that were sent a copy in their email because they were interviewing the candidate and they're not in the HR department, then have to go back into their files and try and find a way of getting rid of that information, which is quite a tricky thing to do. So I think the transition is about understanding what technology is available, and we have technologies, of course, that help people find out what data they've got and where and how old it is, when it was last modified at scale. So it's about finding technological solutions. It's about being very careful about nudging employees to do the right thing. So at the end of the day, employees are trying to get their job done. So nudging them to do the right things while also being productive and getting things done is probably the right way from a human point of view to get those behaviours working. But I think from our point of view, that is the next big stage in terms of information governance, is making it come alive and practicable.
And that's a good point there. We've recently been in a customer that felt that their HR policy and their passports were all kept in a secure place, and the process was correct. And actually, when we've done a scan of email, we found actually a lot of people were breaking the policy and sending emails with passports in it. So it's a real life to your point as well, actually. Exonar have this concept I've heard about around the information intelligence. Can you explain a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so information intelligence is really our vision of where we want organisations to get to with their data. So first of all, we want them to be able to understand what they've got at scale and who's got access to it, where it is, and everything about their data estate, which for a big company is a very diverse and interesting challenge in itself. We then want to help them protect the bits that need protecting, so identify high-risk information, sensitive information, make sure that that's managed and looked after in a really nice way, but then also be able to exploit and extract and distill knowledge from data as an asset as well. So, a lot of focus right now is on privacy and on those things because it's top of mind and it's important and it's costly if you get it wrong, etc. But everyone also understands, of course, that data is a massive asset of the business, and being able to extract knowledge and expertise and potentially competitive information that helps you to compete with your peers in the marketplace is something that most organizations don't do quite as well as they'd like to. So information intelligence describes an organization that is able to do all of that with their data at any one time. But it's, it's very much a vision as much as anything else, and it's one that we hope to realize with our customers.
Yeah, I suppose on that point, we're seeing customers now like going down that policy and then classifying their data. So anything that they can have then that can actually find that data that meets that policy is key, and we've been asked that question so much as well now. So that vision is absolutely on.
Yeah, and it's also about identifying information and then tracking progress towards that along the way. So you talk about that one policy, for example. It's about being able to identify what the policy is and what the data relates to that in your organization, but then plot progress over time. Because compliance and managing data is not a one-shot exercise, it's a continual process. And organizations need to figure out whether they're making progress, whether they're going in the right direction, and steer their policies and their response to those policies in the right way. So it all takes something together into information intelligence. The other thing we're noticing is it feels like cybersecurity teams and information governance teams used to be very separate, but it feels to me like that might be changing a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's another good question actually. So we're seeing those meetings we go to now are covering off with the IT departments. They're bringing in heads of security, heads of compliance, because the world our customers are living in is getting more complex. We're seeing that move to the cloud, that perimeter security that was very simple in the old days now to be much more complex. The quality of the data you're holding internally is now sitting in the cloud. How do you make sure what you have on premise in your data center now is in the public cloud? And the decisions you're making from an IT perspective are now being made by security and compliance together. So we're seeing a decision-making process involving those teams where maybe 3 or 4 years ago that we didn't see that.
Yeah, and there's no point, of course, locking the gates at the front from a cybersecurity point of view, but then having lots of, poorly configured, poorly managed data on the inside. I guess the two things need to work together anyway, don't they?
Absolutely, and there's been technologies around for a long while for that, but they've been, integrated by the wrong team sometimes. You've got IT integrating with DLP, data loss protection type solutions. But the data hasn't been the one under concern. It's actually when it's leaking out of your organization. It's trying to make sure, have you got the right security on the right data when it's in the right place and right area, and can you find it when you need it as well?
The other thing we're talking to our customers about now is really taking what was policy and written down in preparation for GDPR, and so written probably by a combination of the business but also the legal teams, and then trying to figure out how to put those policies in action within data, which is going to take a combination probably of the governance teams and cybersecurity and IT and all of those people working together.
And part of that, we're seeing the benefits of that around the cost reductions you can get from that. Because if you know where your data is, you can understand what data you don't need to keep anymore. So you can start to reduce the footprint of technology you might need, or the cost of cloud technology there as well. So there's real benefits from a cost perspective of actually understanding where your data is and the security you need to put around it. Because not all data is equal. Some parts of your data will need to be kept for 7 years, some parts can be deleted tomorrow. And it's just understanding the quality of the data you have with the right security elements you have as well.
So we're delighted that BlueSource has chosen to take Ixona's products and start taking us to market around data governance. How do you see that working over the next few months with your customers?
Okay, we're really excited about this opportunity. I suppose if I go back to our heritages around that Microsoft-esque world, the communication channels you use within Microsoft, whether it's Exchange, whether it's Yammer, whether it's now Teams, but we don't have great tools to find it. We know the Microsoft Compliance Suite, and it's up and coming, but it doesn't answer the on-premise issues that customers have. It doesn't look at file servers. It doesn't look at Dropbox. So we've been looking for solutions that give a one-stop solution to our customers, enable them to find data no matter where it is, no matter what kinds of file it is. So be able to go to the market and go to our customers with that solution, because also they're not interested in that archiving world so much, i.e. taking data from one place and moving it to another place, because they've got to back it up, they've got to protect it, they've got to do all that stuff we talked about. So the fact that it can stay where it is in its native format, and the fact that we can then search it and find it and meet the policy requirements is absolutely exciting for us and our customers as well.
So from our point of view, BlueSource is a key partner as we look to build scale. So as we've got our Series A investment, we're looking to grow really quickly. We want to focus on the technology and making that scalable. In terms of delivering the outcomes for customers, you guys have got a great support and service infrastructure that we can't scale that quickly anyway. So for us, you know, in a perfect world, we become famous for our technology, and BlueSource become famous for being the ones to take it to market with us and make it successful in the customer's context. So thanks, John, for coming in to chat. It's been great to talk to you. I think we've covered some really good content. I'm starving, I don't know about you. Let's get some lunch.
Great idea.